This is a really important and interesting development. There were protests this weekend in Israel against the genocide. And I say that very specifically in terms of how I use those words, against the genocide, because we've had protests in Israel, which, for example, call for a ceasefire, but often specifically focused on the hostages, Israeli hostages, rather than opposing the genocide of the Palestinian people, which is, of course, taking place as we speak. And one of those who took part in these crucial protests, which brought together Jewish Israelis and also Palestinian citizens of Israel, is Iddo Elam, who is a 19-year-old refusenik. That's someone who refused to do the mandatory service in the Israeli Defense Forces, and is a brilliant activist who should be very proud of himself. Hey, Iddo, how you doing?
Hi, Owen, how are you doing?
I would hear, let's talk about these protests. So firstly, just explain a bit before in terms of the character of these protests and how significant they are. Tell me who organised them, who was behind these protests?
This protest that we are talking about was organized by the High Follow-up Committee for Arab Citizens in Israel. It's basically an organization in a coalition of all the Palestinian leadership of Palestinian citizens of Israel, together with many Jewish anti-genocide activists. We organized this in central Tel Aviv because there were no protests against the genocide in Tel Aviv, and it's not talked about in mainstream Israeli society. So the significance of thousands of people, many of whom are Palestinians in central Tel Aviv, talking about the genocide is massive. It's the first of its kind and first of its size, basically since October the 7th.
How many people do you think would you estimate were there?
The official estimates by the organizers is 5,000. I would say somewhere around that amount, yeah.
So just to be clear, in terms of other protests, because people will have seen often very large protests, which are often, I guess, presented as peace protests. But, I mean, is it fair to say that a lot of those protests don't actually oppose the genocide in principle? Their view is just that strategically, we want to get Israeli hostages back safe, and this is the wrong way to get Israeli hostages back safe. And many of those people would support resuming the genocide if that goal was achieved. Is that not an unreasonable description?
Yeah, sure. I mean, the mainstream protest is also growing. I mean, just last week we were talking about 400,000 Israelis in the streets talking about stopping the war and bringing back the hostages, which is very good. It's very good that more and more people in Israel are talking about opposing the continuation of the aggression on Gaza. But they are not talking about the starvation. They are not talking about the systematic killing of aid workers and journalists, and they are not talking about genocide, obviously. So even if we sometimes join the more mainstream protests and try to, organize what we call the anti-occupation bloc or the anti-genocide blocks that we do, we are a small part of those protests, while the general message is not anti-genocide.
Before I ask you more about the atmosphere in Israel, I mean, a very large number of those who took part in these protests are Palestinian citizens of Israel, who represent about a fifth of the population. I mean, is it fair to say that a lot of those Palestinian citizens are scared to be vocal, to come out? I mean, there have been examples. I mean, I've interviewed people about this of Palestinian citizens of Israel who've suffered consequences for speaking out. So do you think, I mean, is this protest partly significant because it's enabled or given kind of confidence for Palestinian citizens, for example, to come out and protest?
Yes, this protest, I would say, is a continuation of a protest that happened in the end of July in a Palestinian city called Sachnin, which is in the Israeli territory, just so we are clear. It was estimated that to that protest, more than 20,000 people came. It was the first approved protest in Palestinian society since October the 7th, because unless we are collaborating Jews with Palestinians, since October the 7th, they did not give any permits for strictly Palestinian protests, especially on this amount of size. So that protest kind of broke the barrier and told us that we need to do something together also in Tel Aviv. And even this protest, the police 1 day before tried to cancel it. They canceled our permit to march, but we decided that it's better to at least do something and demonstrate, even though they canceled the permit. And this is the process since October the 7th. I mean, we know many people, comrades of mine, that have been arrested just for thinking about protests, just for organizing protests before they even happened, with no official, crime committed or something like that. We know people that have been disappeared also. So the reason that Palestinians are scared is because Israel is giving them a reason to. It's not just like unbased fear. It's because police have been basically systematically arresting Palestinians who are trying to organize since October the 7th.
I mean, in terms of Jewish citizens of Israel, how much is there the question? I mean, you've talked a bit about that there, but in terms of obviously state repression and also stigma. I mean, these are two very powerful forces that can deter people in any context from protesting. So how significant is that for Jewish Israeli citizens?
It's very, very significant. I mean, I would say even with the protest on Saturday, it's not like it was massively popular. It's not like we did not face fascist threats of attacks. It's not like every video or post we post on Instagram doesn't get like hundreds of comments of hate, of death threats and stuff like that. For us refuseniks, it's very normal at this point. I mean, we have been vocal since the start about the genocide. For every Israeli that is vocal about the genocide, it's basically daily hate, death threats, and in the streets when we protest, we are talking about getting spat at, attacked, with impunity because the police does not arrest our attackers. And for me also, I mean, when October the 7th happened, I was still in 12th grade. I mean, when I opposed the horrible massacres of the Palestinians in Gaza, I was called a Hamas supporter, I was called a Nazi, I was called a traitor within my school and by many people that I had to see daily. So we are lucky that it hasn't gotten to the point of horrible violence, but we are amping up towards that more and more, with now people being attacked basically in every protest, basically in every demonstration, and even members of Knesset, like you talked with Ofer in the past, have been attacked recently, and the police haven't arrested anybody, even though Haaretz reported the names and photos of the attackers.
And just so everyone's clear, Ofer Kasif is an Israeli politician associated with Hadash leftist party, which brings together Jewish and Palestinian citizens who obviously oppose the genocide and the oppression of the Palestinian people in general. I mean, just in terms of the atmosphere within Israeli society, I mean, I've often described this as genocidal mania, not a phenomenon unique to Israel. Obviously, genocide throughout history, it's a precondition of genocide. I mean, you look at the polling, and it is terrifying often to look at that polling of Jewish Israelis. That's because, as I said, for everyone, just so we're clear, 20% of the population are Palestinian, and they have obviously on overall very different views. But the polling of Jewish Israelis will say, for example, that the vast majority oppose all humanitarian aid to Gaza, which obviously we've seen has resulted in famine and means mass death. That the large majority want to remove Gaza's entire population. There was a poll last year which said that Jewish Israelis were divided between those who thought enough firepower had been used and not enough firepower had been used in Gaza. 1.5% said too much firepower had been used. I mean, these are extraordinary figures. And what's your thoughts on, I guess, because for me, I think what's different about this, I mean, if you look, for example, at Serb nationalism in the 1990s, you get this kind of same combination of chauvinism and victimhood, which can be based on real horrors. I mean, the Serbs suffered genocide at the hands of the Nazis. But what's different here is impunity, in that Israel is being allowed to do what it wants by the West, so there's nothing to hold it back. I mean, do you think that's what's happening? It's these three things combined, which mean that genocide or mania can just keep spiraling, and there's pretty much nothing to keep that in check.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I would say that I always say that if all countries around the world, besides the United States, because I do not expect anything from Trump, condemned this genocide and stopped giving arms to Israel, it would be much harder for Israelis to be stuck in this bubble of, our mainstream media that says that everything is justified and everything has a reason. And all the journalists that we kill, like the 4 we killed just now, are Hamas militants. It would be much harder for Israelis to comprehend if all our allies around the world started condemning us. They are talking about it. They're not doing anything. I mean, Keir Starmer and Macron are the same. This genocidal mania comes from the deep militarization in our society. I mean, since kindergarten, you are taught that we were attacked in 1948 and we were attacked on 67, and we were continued to be attacked by all Arabs around us, and that is just because they are taught to hate us. We're not taught about the Nakba. We're not taught about the continued systematic displacement in the West Bank. And because we're not taught about that, then why should a young Israeli whose parents served in the IDF, whose friends serve in the IDF, refuse? Why should he believe that the BBC or CNN or whoever sometimes talk about starvation or killing of Palestinians? Why should he believe them and not believe the same news anchor he's been seeing in Israeli media since he was 4 years old? It's very hard to break from this bubble, and it's very hard for us to reach out to these young people, because many of them now many young people around me do want the end to what they call the war in Gaza, because they see it as a political war, a Netanyahu's war, they call it. But they still do not receive any images, any videos from Gaza. They still do not get the reporting from the ground. And that is why we are doing what we are doing. That is why we are reaching out to these young people saying, you should think twice about enlisting. You should think twice about the status quo. And maybe, just maybe, you should research a bit, look at these images of babies who have been killed, and look them in the eyes and say whether or not it was justified or not. Because I think many people who are still young, still not completely stuck in this bubble, will be able to face this reality. And we are still growing. I mean, every week we are having more and more people reach out to us.
I mean, that's what I'm interested in too, is that dehumanization you talk about of the Palestinian people, which is so ingrained, obviously, in Israeli society. How much is there signs of that breaking in amongst some Jewish Israelis? How much is that happening? And because I guess at the moment, there's some would say, well, the reality is not being shown by Israeli television. Obviously, people have an internet connection. It's not like the Western media, I'm afraid to say, is showing all the atrocities either. So is there any sign of that dehumanization, which again is the precondition for all atrocities committed in human history? Is there how much are people starting to think, well, these are people, just basic? I mean, you have to be just not radical ideas. These are human beings who are suffering terrible horrors because of our military, and their worth is as much as a Jewish Israeli. How much of those ideas, very basic ideas, how much are they getting any traction?
I would start by saying that I don't want to justify Israeli society at all. Like you said, we are very much ingrained with this genocidal mania, but it is starting to reach people. It is starting to gain traction because at this point, I think nobody can tell the regular lies about the most moral army or about, oh, Hamas is lying about the amount of people killed, because just seeing like a bird's eye view of Gaza will tell you how many people have been killed. There are 0 houses in many areas. You can just see barren lands. People at this point cannot just throw out the normal propaganda that they have been taught. So many people, even like recently, I've seen some in mainstream media, Israeli mainstream media, saying that maybe we shouldn't do starvation. Maybe we should let aid in, even if Hamas is stealing them. And that is a lie also, obviously. But even if they believe that Hamas is stealing them, they are starting to talk about maybe we should still not starve children because that is a war crime. And maybe the aid will also get to our hostages and we don't need to starve our own hostages. But yeah, I mean, it's just like people have the internet, but when the news feed on Twitter is feeding you propaganda, and I live in Israel, it's feeding me Israeli propaganda too.
Yeah.
And everything has a justification, and everything has, oh, well, we had to kill these people because, this random Hamas militant that you have never heard of was standing behind them. So it's very hard to still reach Israeli people. But I mean, we're talking, like I said, we're talking about 400,000 people marching against the war in Tel Aviv, even if it's not for the same reasons, and even if they do not mention genocide, you do hear hostage families at those protests talk about not killing Palestinians, talk about the fact that Palestinians are human beings too. You had just this month a mother of a hostage calling for young people to refuse to enter Gaza because it's killing the hostages. And the word refusing just 2 years ago was complete taboo. I mean, people wouldn't even think about calling for refusement, even if they are only talking about Israeli lives. Because the army is so holy here, really, it's the most holy thing. I mean, people are so proud of their history in the army. People are so proud of their sons and daughters who are serving the country. And we are not just called traitors because we are not giving our own part, but because people truly believe that if we refuse, that if more people refuse, then we are risking a second Holocaust, we are risking the destruction of Israel, as they see. And that is, I mean, they have ingrained in their minds that if Israel falls, then we are doomed and the Arabs will kill us all. But yeah, I mean, once again, like I said, more and more people are protesting the war. More and more people are noticing the genocide, are noticing Palestinian suffering. And more people are getting to us and asking to be organized with us and asking to protest with us, like the people that hold the signs of dead Palestinian children now every week in Tel Aviv. We are talking about something that started with a couple dozens of people, and now every weekend there's hundreds and hundreds of Israelis holding signs of the dead Palestinian children that we have killed in Gaza. And that is very important.
I mean, on that, you met the G word. So last month, 2 Israeli human rights organizations, including Bethlehem, who do extremely important work, they came out with reports saying this is genocide. Has that opened any floodgates? Is talking about genocide now something which is happening in a meaningful way?
No, shortly no. People in Israel, many even on what we call the left, or many even that are talking about Palestinian suffering, still refuse to call it genocide. That is very unfortunate. We're seeing many people that, we are working with, we are partners with, still not managing to comprehend the fact that everybody is calling this genocide around the world, and our own human rights organizations, Doctors for Human Rights and B'Tselem are calling it genocide, and that is because it's genocide. I mean, when all of our ministers are calling for ethnic cleansing and completely wiping out Gaza, and then committing that, why should we believe that, they're just saying that to appease their crowd? No, they're saying that because they want to commit genocide. That's very obvious. So, yeah, I mean, we have been calling it genocide for a very long time, but unfortunately, talking with Israelis, it's very hard to say this word, because this word is immediately jumping for them as something that they should oppose and say justification, because, it's not like the Holocaust, we shouldn't call it a genocide. Many people have been calling it now a massacre or something like this, which is very unfortunate.
I just want to ask you just a couple of other things. I mean, one is about you're a refusenik. So this is the movement of people, as you talked about there, who refuse to do their mandatory service in the IDF. So just tell me just briefly about your experience and how much is this movement, how much is it gaining traction?
I refused in November 2024, so a very long time ago now. My experience, I was in prison with a fellow refusenik that entered on the same day with me, and Itamar Greenberg, which you talked with in the past. When we were in prison, we were 3 people, sometimes 4 in prison at max. A few months before us, we are talking about maximum 3 people, sometimes even just 1 in prison. Now we are talking about 9 active refuseniks who are sitting in military prison, fellow comrades and friends of mine who are imprisoned for months and months now. It is very much growing. I mean, since October the 7th till now, it might sound not like a lot of people, but we're talking about close to 30 refuseniks that we know of, that we personally helped through this process. There are many people that enter prison not publicly and not with our help, and we cannot know the official statistics. But in years before October the 7th, sometimes you had only 3 people entering prison. Sometimes you had 1. Sometimes you had 0. So having close to 30 is a very high spike in number. Besides that, I mean, we're talking about probably since October the 7th, thousands of young Israelis who have gotten exemptions because they did not want to go and fight this war. Once again, the IDF does not want to share with us the official statistics because it's very secretive about that. But I personally know many, many friends from school that just decided, well, we are not going to the army while it's attacking in Gaza. And many, many people now in Israel have already, who have already served, reservists, are refusing in their thousands. We know about thousands of refuseniks who are reservists, and they are not put in prison like we are. But in the end of the day, the main point is that Israel cannot commit genocide without soldiers. And now, I was just talking with LBC in Britain about the fact that we want to enlist 60,000 reservists. Israel does not have 60,000 reservists. It doesn't have even 20,000 reservists. It doesn't have even 10,000 reservists. It's all just like a lie for Israelis to basically shadow the refusenik movement and basically try and reach out to people who are considering not going to the army and telling them, no, you must, because we might lose if we do not enlist now. People are getting on Facebook like messages and commercials to, if you haven't enlisted yet, now is the time to enlist, like US propaganda level stuff, which in the past, like I said, I mean, the military is so central here. There were no commercials to tell you to enlist because it was just expected of you to enlist. So you're seeing this crumbling status quo around the military and this crumbling trust in the higher ups in the IDF by soldiers, by reservists, and by teenagers like us who are saying, oh, if you want to occupy and settle in Gaza, then you're not getting our manpower to do so.
It's really, really, really interesting and so important that we can see that kind of hugely courageous movement. I just want to ask you about the West Bank, the illegally occupied, of course, West Bank, which is colonized with hundreds of thousands of illegal settlers. The finance minister, Bezalel Smotrich, is the de facto governor of the West Bank, and one of the most extreme figures within a very extreme government. I mean, he's announced this expansion of settlements in the so-called E1 area of the West Bank, which would basically chop the West Bank in half with the aim of making a Palestinian state impossible, which he openly says. You know, that's the purpose. Just tell me a bit about that and what's been done to organize against that.
Well, we, in the past few weeks, have been ramping up the demonstrations and organizing around, in general, the genocide, but also, obviously, the settler violence in the West Bank. When the activist and journalist Ode Hatelin died was murdered, in El Khir, in Masafra Yatta, we protested in Tel Aviv, and we blocked roads, and we continue to do such actions in order to raise the voice of the Palestinians in the West Bank. The reason that Bezalel Smotrich is continuing with this plan, which was never talked about by any government till now, basically, is directly because of the recognition of Palestine by France and Canada and maybe the UK and maybe other countries, because he's saying, well, if you want to recognize Palestine, then I will make it impossible to have something to recognize. That was what he was saying. And I think the message that we want to tell people around the world, and specifically leaders around the world, is don't back down now, because you shouldn't be scared of this fascist Israeli minister who is directly saying that he wants to contradict you and attack your position. You should double down on that position, recognize Palestine now, not wait, not think about it. And once again, put sanctions on these people, put sanctions on settlers, because that is the main thing that will help us, the activists, Palestinian and Jews, on the ground. And that is the main thing that will stop them from feeling, powerful and impenetrable. Settlements are expanding. We, in the end of the day, we are talking about something that we as activists cannot really stop on the ground. Like we said, I mean, Ode was just killed for documenting his own ethnic cleansing project. People have forgotten that international activists have been killed during this genocide in the West Bank. An American citizen was killed during documenting ethnic cleansing in the West Bank. But many of our comrades are on the ground in Masafra Yatta, in the Jordan Valley, in many areas in the West Bank, basically living with Palestinians as, I mean, it's funny to say, but as Israeli human shields against the Israeli state, because it's far harder for an Israeli settler or an Israeli soldier, which in the West Bank it's the same thing, to kill a fellow Israeli with impunity than killing a Palestinian, which we have proven that they get impunity for. We specifically in the Hadash party are in contact with many villages in the West Bank, including a village run by our friends in the Palestinian People's Party. They are facing daily attacks, daily, burning of cars, burning of homes, stones thrown at them, crops ruined. People are getting run over in their own villages, in their own streets. And it's impossible to deal with without, international support and without not even support, just the complete block of aid, because this aid that people are giving to Israel around the world is getting in the end to those settlers who are killing, murdering, and pillaging with impunity.
Amen. Absolutely crucial work that you're doing. And it does take a lot of courage, but history will be extremely kind to you and all those others who organised and spoke out against the genocide when it was very difficult to do so. These are grim, grim times, but the work of people like you offers hope. So for everyone watching, press like and subscribe with your comments, share the video. But Iddo, honestly, thank you to you and your comrades. You should be so proud of what you've done.
Thank you, Owen.